This is the Limitless Leadership Lounge, a tri-generational conversation for emerging leaders. Really excited to dive into this discussion today. Also want to remind you, if you've been getting value from our show, be sure to leave us a review up on wherever you listen to the show, or maybe you watch up on YouTube, and we'd appreciate a subscription up there as well, just so you never miss out on the incredible leaders that we bring to you to help you on your leadership journey. So I am Jon Goehring, joined today by Coach Jim Johnson, who has brought on another guest here that we're excited to dive in with. So, Coach, go ahead and introduce our guest.
Yeah, I'm very excited because I've met Dr. Omékongo Dibinga at the National Speakers Conference a few times. We actually work with the same speaking manager, and he's a really good man. So we're really excited to have him. Let me share a little bit about him. He's got a lot of great things going on in his life. He is the upstander. His life's mission is to inspire all across the globe to take a stand when they witness an injustice, no matter how small or large. A John Maxwell Team Top 30 speaker. He is an international speaker, trilingual poet, TV talk show host, rapper, and professor of intercultural communication at American University, where he also serves as the faculty affiliate to the Anti-Racist Research and Policy Center. His urban music award-winning work has been best described by Nick Giovanni as outstanding and exciting and new while being very old. His book, From the Limbs of Poetry, was described by Essence magazine as a remarkable and insightful collection of exquisite poetry that touches sacred places within your spirit. He is one of five international recipients out of 750,000 to win the first ever CNN iReport Spirit Award. He has received over 1 million views on CNN. And without any further ado, Omekongo, welcome to the Limitless Leadership Lounge.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, and you know what? I've got to delve in. Another book I didn't share, but is called Lies About Black People. And I'm curious, I've been fortunate. I've met a lot of African Americans, coached a lot of African Americans in my coaching career. But so I'm very curious, and I'm sure our audience is. Tell us a few lies about Black people from your book.
Oh, absolutely. And this is the book right behind me, Lies About Black People. The subtitle is How to Combat Racist Stereotypes and Why It Matters. And there are just so many lies. And it's not even just lies that other people have been told about Black people, but these are lies that Black people have been trained to believe about themselves on many levels. One, for example, is that Black people can't swim. And yeah, and one of my chapters in the book, each chapter deals with a particular lie, and one that chapter is called "Black People Can't Swim Here." And the idea is that it's not that Black people couldn't swim; it's that they weren't allowed to swim in different areas because of segregation. And in some of our communities, some of our white communities, they would rather let a pool close and get covered with concrete that their own kids not have access to, rather than integrate it with Black people, which was
Wow.
also part of the thing that led to the rise of a lot of the country clubs that we see across the country because they have private swimming pools. So that idea is that Black people were not good at swimming. That's been one. Black people are inherently bad with money. People don't want to talk about America's history of redlining and literally drawing red lines around community maps that have Black populations that and then undervaluing their homes, and they couldn't get access to loans. Even soldiers coming out after World War II couldn't get access to the GI Bill that other white soldiers got access to, and so Black people were denied an opportunity to get a leg up in the financial sector because of discrimination. And then lastly, another one I would say is that Black people are more prone to be criminals. And
Mm.
people don't look at a lot of the laws that were designed to criminalize us more than other communities. And so the idea is to break all of these different stereotypes so we can continue to work together towards building a community where everybody can be celebrated and not tolerated.
It's a
Awesome.
beautiful thing. And it's also interesting that in your bio you spoke about injustices that are small and fighting those injustices, not just the big injustices that we fight. What are some of those small injustices that we might just kind of let go or not even notice?
Well, I think the easiest one, particularly as it relates to young leaders, is bullying. Simple things that happen in our schools, our high schools, every grade level, K to college, right? Simple things like calling somebody out of their name. My name is Omékongo, and I can't tell you just the amount of bullying. I'm American citizen, born here in the United States. Parents are from Congo, so that's where my name comes from. I don't have a stereotypical accent, but it didn't matter. Just the name alone led to so many different types of bullying, name calling. When I was like elementary, it was Omékongo, had a farm, E-I-E-I-O. They would make the nursery rhymes out of it. Then when I got older, it was likening me to a monkey, an animal. Oh, did you come here on a boat? Like all of that type of stuff. And as Dr. King reminds us, when it comes down to it, we're going to remember the silence of our friends more than the ignorance and violence of our enemies. And so I can tell you, seventh grade, eighth grade, ninth grade, sitting in rooms, watching people say things about me, watching people, having people literally assault me, beat me up physically in class, and people who I thought were my friends not say anything. And I often think about what would have happened if one of those like just one of those classmates said, "Don't do that. That's wrong." What that would have made me feel. So those are some of the small injustices, and I even got it from some of my teachers. So those are some of the small injustices that we see every single day. That if we can learn to take a stand for those type of things, it becomes a lot easier to stand for the larger issues we experience in our society.
Well said. So tell us exactly, to share with our audience, what you mean by being an upstander.
Well, I believe that everybody is outstanding in terms of just being here, being on the planet, doing the work that they're doing. So my question is, why settle for outstanding when you can be upstanding? And being upstanding is just deciding not to be complicit when you see things going wrong. I believe that silence is compliance. And a lot of times I find myself talking about or reflecting on the Holocaust, and as inhumane and savage and brutal as the Holocaust was, the other thing that makes it so bad was that everything that Hitler did was legal because he was allowed to change the laws. And so there's this idea of we can commit a genocide, millions of people slaughtered, and so on and so forth, but somehow it's okay because we've created a legal structure around it. And I
Yeah.
just think so many times throughout history, how many times do we see things that people said is okay simply because there was some legislation and a signature next to it? So to me, an upstander is somebody, a late John Lewis, who's going to stand up and say, "This is wrong. Let's get in good trouble. Let's protest. Let's boycott. Let's do these particular things because every human deserves dignity." And that's what an upstander does. It believes that I don't have to believe in your politics. I don't have to agree with you on everything, but I believe in your basic right as a human being to exist. And I'm going to fight for that because if I don't fight, I'm part of the problem and not the solution.
It may sound to some people it sounds over the top, dramatic. It sounds like, well, this is just ridiculous. This isn't going to happen here. But you mentioned something like Hitler and and how easy that was because it was legal. How do we avoid that kind of situation ever happening again?
Well, one of the things we have to do is we have to continue to empower people to be leaders in their community. When I look at, the House of Representatives, I think the youngest person is like 25 or 24 or something like that. Got active after, what happened at the shootings in high school in Florida. Like, we need to encourage leadership at young levels, and we need to encourage it at the local levels. I can't tell you how many. I ran for city council once in DC, and I remember I was standing out trying to get a petition signed, and a woman walked by and said, "I don't do that politics stuff." And I'm like, "Well, if you don't do politics, politics is going to do you." And it's like, you don't know anything about my positions, right? But I can get elected to something that's going to influence your life. And you just walk by, right? And so we have to encourage kids that whether it's voting for dog catcher. I had a situation on my street, recently where people are speeding through. Emailed the city councilor, and talked about the need for speed humps. And, someone came out, a couple of days later. Like, so many people just feel so like politics is so distant from them. And there's a lot of ways to lead. It's not just politics. But when I talk about politics, I mean getting involved in the process. School leadership. Are you involved in your school leadership? You see homelessness on the streets. Are you creating something that could help feed them? There are churches and mosques and synagogues that have programs that you can help with the outreach. Are you involved in community beautification, picking up litter, on the street? Like, we have to lead by example on everything because in too many instances, particularly young people, are not seeing those examples.
Well said. Well, I know Omakano, when I was doing research on you, one of the things that was very curious to me, and I'm sure will be for our audience, is the 10 steps to grow towards your greatness. Can you share maybe a couple steps?
Yeah, well, one of the first step is actually to run from your story, and this is from my book, Grow Towards Your Greatness, which recently became available as an ebook as well, so you can get that physically, and audiobooks coming. But the first step is to run towards your story and not away from it. So many people in life run away from who they are, and I did that. My full name, I was named after the person who saved my grandfather's life as a child. It's a powerful story. His name was Omékongo. My name is Omékongo Dibinga Wanga Kakese Washington Casa. Can't fit on Twitter. But that's a powerful story there. But because everybody was bullying me, calling me names, you know what I said, Jim? I said, forget that. Just call me O. As a matter of fact, I didn't even make that up. Somebody else called me O, and it just stuck. And I wasn't
Mhm.
strong enough to say, this is my name. And
Right.
so I ran away from that. I ran away from my African history. I ran, and the more I ran, the worse I performed in school. And it wasn't until I embraced who I was that my grades started to skyrocket, my leadership started to skyrocket. And I see this with so many other groups. When I was a kid growing up, a lot of the Latino students, if your name was Jose, it was like, nah, call me Joe. If you came from an Asian country, your parents, in my experience, their parents would automatically give them an American name, like Emily or John, so they could fit in easily. And I just saw it across, in retrospect, I saw it across so many cultures, including my own. So the first step is like you have to run towards yourself, towards your own story. Another step I would give is that you have to also learn to reinvent yourself. Now, there's a difference between reinventing yourself and being fake. Reinventing yourself is like as you're going through your process of growth, if you are experiencing things that are not meeting what you need to do in the moment, you need to adopt new skills. So a guy like me, I'm not in high school anymore. Maybe I look like it. I do a lot of yoga. I got the trying to get there. But I had to do things like reinvent myself and learning how to do talks on YouTube, to learn social media. My principles are the same. What I'm doing is the same, but I had to reinvent myself in order to reach new audiences. And that's what part of the grow. Grow is an acronym. It means give, release, overcome, and win. So those are two of the steps that I feel like are really important. And then that last chapter is when I really go into the importance of giving, releasing, overcoming, and winning.
You talked earlier, Omekongo, about some of those friends that you had or who you thought that you had in school who didn't speak up. Maybe somebody, like Coach or I, we're white people. We haven't experienced the same sorts of prejudices and experiences that you have growing up for sure, and that so many millions of others have. What can we do in those circumstances to still stand up for what we believe in, which is actually really aligned with what you believe in?
Well, two things. Everybody, regardless of whether you come from a position of privilege or not, or anything, everybody knows what it's like to be othered at some point in their lives. Maybe you were othered because you weren't the best athlete on the team. Maybe you were othered because you were poor, which many white people have experience with, right? Maybe you were othered because like I'm not LGBTQ, right? But I know what it's like to be othered as a black person, and so I can see what happens when I see them being othered, and so. The late Dr. Maya Angelou said, I'm a human being. No experience should be foreign to me. So it's like we have to have that type of connection to say, okay, I'm not that, but I know what this part of it feels like. And if I don't want that to anyone to feel like how I felt, then I have to stand up for those people. Another thing that not because of, oh, I'm some holier than thou, I don't believe in allyship, I believe in partnership. Because allies are like fans that go to games. They cheer on their favorite team. Whether their team wins or loses, they go home and live their lives. Partners are in the game, fighting for the same championship, and that's my mindset. Secondly, as you can tell, I love acronyms. So another thing that people can do is have another acronym called LEAD, LEAD, and that stands for listen, educate, advocate, and decide. Number one, learn to be a better listener. You don't have it all figured out. They say we have two ears and one mouth. You got to use them in proportion. So sometimes rather than going to a space and being the alpha, just sit back and listen because you never know what you might learn. Second is you got to educate yourself. You have to learn about the issues that are affecting communities today. We got so many trigger words that politicians and other leaders are using to get people riled up. But when you interview them on, hey, do you actually know what this word means? They don't know. So
Mm.
you have to educate yourself on the issues and the terms of the day. Even my college students at American University, I'm like, you all have a future. You're college students, future diplomats, presidents. I throw out a word, I throw out a term. Have you heard of this? Everybody raise your hands. Do you know what it means? But maybe two people raise their hands.
Mhm.
So educate yourself on the issues of the day. Then you have to advocate, which means get out there and fight for what you've listened and educated yourself
Yeah.
on, and then just decide. Decide that this is how you're going to live your life. You're going to decide to be an upstander for other people and use your privilege and influence to do that in every way, shape, that you can.
Well said. Well, I got to ask you because being a big personal growth guy over the years, and I know that Les Brown wrote the uh, introduction to one of your books, and also John Maxwell. So the two icons in the personal growth leadership world. I'm curious. Let's start with Les Brown. What have you learned from Les Brown? And then certainly I want to know what you learned from John Maxwell.
What have I learned from Les Brown? It's more like what haven't I learned from Les Brown? Les Brown taught me so much. I would say like, I learned about professional speaking watching my parents grow up, but he was, because my dad was a preacher and an activist as well. But Les Brown really trained me on like how to narrate a story. He trained me on how to put myself in positions. One of the things I love, he said, to really connect with the audience, is he says of less of me, more of we. Talking about, don't get sit up there and bragging and talking about your own 10 points and all of that other type of stuff. So those are the things I learned from him. And then just the power of his story. Somebody who was labeled EMR back in those days when we used EMR, educable mentally retarded, wasn't allowed to participate in speech competitions, and actually literally had to break into his school at night to get on stage to speak because he was so passionate about it, and then to grow to become one of the top speakers on the planet. That inspiration, that is just a every single day you wake up and it's just like no excuses. I still listen to Les Brown every day, just when I wake up, because that's the other thing I learned about from him. The first things you do in the first 20 minutes of your day and the things you do the last 20 minutes of your day are going to affect your energy for that day and the day after. So I make sure I start with positivity. I actually haven't met John Maxwell. His organization nominated me, and for that position, that title, which I really appreciated. But just watching him over the years from a distance, the idea of always sticking with the concept of leadership. Jim, as a speaker, so many people change topics, change direction, and so on and so forth. But for decades, this idea of leadership and what it takes, and what I appreciate about what John Maxwell has done is that he's opened it up to everybody, all different types of speakers, but the idea and the focus is leadership. And so what I've learned from him, which is so powerful, is that everybody can be a leader in their own way. And I think that's amazing, because so many people, well, I can't talk like Dr. King, or I'm not as powerful as, Rosa Parks, or, I'm not Gandhi. Like I'm not just, and it's just like, be you. You got to be you because everybody else is taken.
Yeah,
I,
that's
I got to
true.
delve in one deeper thing because I kid leaders that you got to be the CST, the chief storyteller. And I know
Mm.
you mentioned, can you help a young leader, because telling stories I think is so powerful in leadership. Could you help our young leaders and on being a more effective storyteller?
Well, one of the things I've also learned, as a professional speaker, is they say never make a point without a story, and never give a story without a point.
Yeah.
What I mean, yeah, you know that, Jay, right? Right. And so one of the things that people do, unfortunately, when they get new to this, is they just talk about themselves the whole time, or they may talk about an issue the whole time. Well, how does it connect? So if I talk to you about me and my changing my name or going by O and all of that other type of stuff, and I just talk about that the whole time, you may be like, that's interesting. But then when I point the finger at you and say, what story did you run away from? Right? Like that's a connection. Are you Muslim and you were afraid to pray 5 times a day because you felt you were going to get vitriol? Again, are you Latino and you change your name because maybe you're, white passing? Like, so, and then that type of thing gets people to reflect. I grew up with a lot of poverty in a very poor community. So that was my challenge, but I didn't grow up with alcoholism in my household. Somebody in that audience did. And somebody, so you have to connect the points with the stories. When you do that, when you turn the questions on the audience, you get them thinking. Because, yeah, maybe you grew up like I grew up with both parents, okay? But maybe you didn't. And so I may have a situation, but my father was an activist. He went to Zambia and they tried to assassinate him. So for my entire seventh grade year, he was in a coma and away from my life. So I've experienced that aspect of it. I can turn to an audience and say, what issues of absence have you had to deal with in your life? Or have you not dealt with yet in your life? So that's one of the things that speakers have to do, because that's when people start saying there were 1,000 people in that audience, but he was talking to me. There were
Yeah.
2,000 people in that audience, but she was talking to my soul. That's one of the things. And then also give people small, concrete takeaways. The reason why I love acronyms, because they're easy to remember. And if
Mhm.
everybody can remember, grow. Even if they don't remember, it stands for give, release, overcome, and win. The idea is to grow. If they
Yeah.
don't have to remember, listen, educate, advocate, and decide, but they can remember, I have to lead. So give them easy takeaways, and that's also going to help them connect with you.
You mentioned learning a lot from Les Brown. Also, you've mentioned your father several times too. Um, who was your biggest, greatest mentor as you became the leader that you are today?
Oh, my parents, both my parents. You know, my parents, like I said, from Congo, former Zaire, and you know they started schools in Congo. They were educators in Congo, and you know during what was happening with the colonialism and crisis, they ended up fleeing Congo and making their way to the United States, and they came here and fully integrated into the society in terms of education. They have 9 academic degrees, 3 PhDs from Harvard University. My
Wow.
mom got a doctorate from Harvard. My dad got a PhD and a PhD from Harvard University. My father wrote the paper that revolutionized Harvard Divinity School, which led to his hiring of the first Black dean. You know, my mother is heavily involved in education. Like I said, started a school in Congo as well. So just watching them and their, my mother came to this country, didn't learn English until she was 29. You know,
Wow.
just watching their example and the way that they always stress education and the way that everywhere I saw them go, they always engaged with the community. And the last thing I always take from them is that they were always so humble. I remember with all of their accomplishments, I just named you some of them. I remember I went to a dinner with them once, and they were sitting next to this guy who was just rambling on about all of these things. And I was in high school, maybe ninth grade or something at the time, and this guy was going on and on. And in my head, I'm like, so? Like, my dad did this, my mom did this. And when the guy left the table, I'm like, yo, why didn't y'all check this guy? Why didn't y'all say anything? And they were just like, you know, just wasn't necessary. You know, it's like, what's the point? You know, their idea was actions speak louder than words, and it's like Dr. King said, you know, I'd rather see a good sermon than hear one, right? And so they will always just focus on the actions, and I learned a lot from that as well.
Beautiful. Well, I got to zero in, being a leader. If you were to help a young leader in bringing the right people on their team, and I know you do a lot of work with diversity, what advice would you give that leader to pick the right people for that team?
Well, number one is balance. You can't have all, you know, type A's on a team. But you also have to be, but it also, you have to remember, it also starts with you. And hopefully there's a poem I would like to share when we close out, if that's all right with you to
Please
close out
do.
and kind of speak to that. But some people, some student leaders, and I was president of student council in high school as well.
Okay.
Some leaders will pick people, but they won't empower them. They're just looking to have a resume booster. So these guys are just kind of accessories, right? You have to actually be willing to choose people that you're actually going to delegate responsibility to. The secretary has to do what the secretary is supposed to do. The treasurer has to do this. The VP has to do that. So make sure you're actually picking a team that you're actually going to empower. Number two, you have to remember that you're a direct reflection of your 5 closest friends, but also your 5 closest officers. So don't just look at it as like a fraternity or sorority. Look at people who have different strengths, but also reflect your vision as the leader. That's going to be really important. And make sure you use their resources as well. And then lastly, I will say, like, take advantage of the mentorship of your school staff. whoever your advisor is, if they're serious about being your advisor, take advantage of that so you don't end up, repeating mistakes that didn't have to happen. But it really starts with making sure that you are trusting your team. Patrick Lencioni wrote a classic book, The Five Dysfunctions of a Team. And, a student, if you don't have time to read the book, just Google Five Dysfunctions of a Team. It talks about like fear of accountability, like all of these different types of fears, all these different types of issues, lack of trust. Read those five pillars and definitely do the best to understand that. Also, look at our NSA colleague. If you go, there's a 2-page article. Look up Mark Sanborn, marksanborn.com. He has a 2-page article called Why Leaders Fail.
Mm.
And I feel like every leader on every level should read that 2-page article before they engage in their work as well. That can be very important for students.
Mm. Omékongo, I know you do a lot of music too, and you're trilingual. That is really, really remarkable, and it's something that most of us don't have the skills to be able to accomplish. So let's talk about music and how that came into your life, and now how does that assimilate as well with your identity?
So I was suicidal as a child. I would say middle school was probably the worst years of my life. That coincided with what I told you happened to my dad in Zambia. I was also growing up during the height of the crack epidemic and increasing levels of violence in our community and poverty and the like. And it was reading and I was at a youth conference once and I heard somebody say suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And that kind of started the process of me thinking differently. But the other thing was music, was more specifically poetry. Reading the work of my Dr. Maya Angelou, Dr. Nia Giovanni, that also helped save my life because they were the only two people I was reading at the time that were speaking about Africa in a beautiful way outside of my parents, and everybody else was telling me that I was ugly, barbaric, and savage. So I started memorizing their poetry. My parents would organize these Kwanzaa events, and they would have my sister and I perform at these events. So I started memorizing their poetry, like Ego Tripping and Ain't That Bad, and that led me to writing my own poetry. And so that was when I started. So I started with poetry, then I turned to hip hop, and with hip hop, I did that for a little bit, and this is all still high school, and then I realized that I was starting to sound like a lot of these rappers who are cursing and swearing and all of that, and that takes no intelligence to me. Like I could do this whole podcast right now and rap for like an hour if you just say I can say whatever I want. That doesn't take intelligence to me. So I liked poetry because I had to keep more attention of the audience without an actual beat or a straight rhyme pattern. But then when my nephew was born, I'm an adult now. He was listening to music on the radio that wasn't even edited. And it really bothered me. Like it was a radio and they were letting like, the N word come through and different stuff like that. So I started rapping again because I wanted to show him and other kids that you can rap without swearing or disrespecting women. So
Mm.
that's what led to the trajectory of my career. Now I do spoken word albums, I do hip hop albums, I do spoken word and hip hop albums. But the other reason I do it, and this is important for leadership, is that you have to learn to reach people where they are.
Mm.
I can do an all-day training with a school, and I train schools across the country on issues relating to diversity, equity, and inclusion and leadership. I can work with teachers and faculty and stuff, but I can also do a 1 hour talk with young people where I'm incorporating the poetry and spoken word because that's how they're listening in their moment, in their space. And so my ability to rap, my ability to do spoken word poetry helps me reach different audiences. So sometimes when I speak at a school now, I'll spend the day, I'll talk to the students in the morning, the faculty in the afternoon, and the parents at night because I'm also a parent as well. And so as speakers, you can't expect everybody to just vibe and immediately identify with how you're saying it. You have to be able to adjust to the audience.
That's very
Mm.
cool. Oh, Makara, I do have a few more questions because I know you got a lot to share, but would you like to share your poem now, or you want to do that right at the end?
Oh, we can get it in now. I'm cool with that.
Yeah,
Let's do it.
I'd love to hear it because I do have a couple more questions. I think John does as well.
Sure, this is for the leaders out there. I
Yeah.
haven't thought of a cool title, so for now, I just call it leadership.
Okay.
The chosen few are the few who chose. to step up to open doors tightly closed. So you call yourself a leader. But what does that mean? Getting green, turning green, madly running your team, sadly killing the dreams of a hopeful teen, madly willing your ideas, not even listening? Does it mean you celebrate on your election day because you can add your new position to your resume? Can you handle criticism when your peers diss you because you don't care about theirs but only your issues? Pass the tissue makes me sad how some leaders let power get to their head. Constituents, they forget you're just a leader in name. If you're just searching for fame, for acclaim, it's a shame why some get in the game. Leadership ain't for the lame. Don't take it in vain. Time to rethink your position. Understand why you came. You see, a leader, someone who listens first and speaks. Someone focused on being the change we seek. A leader understands they represent all people. Don't do that. Your leadership will never have a sequel. Do you seek to understand before being understood? Do you take time to visit other neighborhoods? We need real leaders to step up to the plate, to take a swing at racism, other types of hate, to stomp out bullying, help end genocides. Do your best to help others hold their heads with pride. A leader builds a team, can do it all by yourself. And a leader remembers to practice good health because you're no good to others if you're no good to you. So let me ask you again, is leadership in you?
Wow.
Well done.
That was
Well
awesome.
done, Omékongo. That's
That
phenomenal.
was awesome. So
Thank you.
thank you for sharing. That was very powerful. And I can't wait to share that with our audience. Well, I got to ask you, because you did mention in your poem there a little bit about leading yourself. So
Yes.
tell us about how you lead yourself and maybe a habit or two that you would recommend that young leaders really think about implementing in their lives.
Well, one, definitely going back to what Les Brown said about affirming yourself, starting off with something positive before your day starts. I wake up and before I check any text messages or turn on the news, I'm playing a motivational song or listening to a motivational talk, and exercising. I'm doing those things to get my mind right. You know, I say in a lot of my talks, do you have your phone or does your phone have you? Right? You know, so I don't become slave to that. So that's one of the things that I do. I also do affirmations. You know, throughout the day, I say various types of affirmations that help keep me going. Whether it's about money management, whether it's about just affirming myself, that's also important. I know Kendrick Lamar has a popular song, you know, TV off. You know, I'm making sure I'm shutting down things, you know, because too much of the stuff that you consume will tear you down. So those are some of the things that I do that are really important in helping me. And you know, as somebody, you know, with a family, spending as much time, you know, with my kids as possible, is also something that's important to me.
Excellent.
So important to lead yourself before you lead others. Like you mentioned in that poem, that's just critical. Yeah, how good are you to anybody else if you're not good to yourself? Omékongo, I know this is another a big subject that I'm curious to hear your thoughts about from somebody who's worked in this area a lot. DEI has been a topic of conversation right now with a lot of people, and under attack. Really, what do we need to do to ensure that, you know, despite recent changes, we continue the spirit of the late great Dr. King and everyone else who's been fighting for good things?
Whew. Next question. No. So we have to, you know, all right. So you asked this question. So Lyndon B. Johnson said this as president, when he was president. He said, I learned at a young age that if you can convince the poorest white man that he's better than the best colored man, this was the language they used back then, he won't realize that you're picking his pocket. Give him someone to look down on and he'll empty his pockets for you.
Mm.
The attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion is about giving somebody, giving white people in particular, someone else to look down on.
Mm.
But they are not realizing that the people that they are looking down on are actually fighting for their equality. But in our society, we have convinced ourselves that diversity only means race and gender. Two things that many people in America are tired of talking about and never really wanted to talk about in the first place. But they don't understand that diversity also means diversity of thought. It means age diversity, like you all have a tri-generational podcast. It means language diversity. It means religion. It also means physical ability. So what we're seeing now, some departments and things that are getting cut, some poorer white people are realizing that the programs that their special needs child needed, that's getting cut, that was part of the inclusion part of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Mhm.
So what I need people to do is I need to go beyond the trigger words that get them mad at a particular group and understand that, particularly if you are not somebody of means, regardless of what your racial background is, you need access to programs that are diverse, that are inclusive. What are you going to do when the WIC programs get cut, the food stamps programs? That's part of equity. Helping equity and equality are not the same thing. Equity is about helping people get to equality, giving people the things they don't have to get where they need to be. And there are more poor white people in this country than other groups just by majority numbers alone. And so, if we can get more people to understand that this idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion is about creating a society where everybody can get access to the American dream, or at least the start of the process. Look at hospitals that are closing down in rural communities. People that fight for DEI want those hospitals open. People who fight for DEI want rural and poorer communities, that are poorer white communities, to have access to broadband, so they don't have to go to their library to do their homework by the internet, if they for the use to internet, if they have access to a laptop. So there has been a manipulation, John, of what DEI actually means, and it's been used to create this idea of life is a zero-sum game. If that community gains, you are going to lose. And the greatest moments in American history have happened when we fought to expand rights for everybody as opposed to contract rights for some. That's the problem with diversity, equity, and inclusion. You don't lose if I gain, and I don't lose if you gain.
Mhm.
That's the mindset we have to switch, because, and again, Jim, that comes out of NSA, National Speakers Association, right? Why was it started? Because speakers were fighting for small pieces of the same pie, and the idea was, let's come together and make a bigger pie. And now
Right.
look at the association and how it's grown over the years. We need that philosophy for the country.
Well said.
Great
Well
point.
said. Yeah. Well, I'm curious because I know you've written a couple neat books yourself. How about what books would you recommend for a young leader to read? Maybe, a couple that you would highly recommend.
Well, one of the books we didn't talk about is I wrote a book for high school students called The Upstander's Guide to an Outstanding Life. And it
Okay.
talks about like how to change yourself so before you get out there and change the world. I think is really important. I think that people should really get out there. There's so many diverse speakers out there. There's a book called Influencer: The Power to Change Anything or Change Everything. I haven't looked at it in a while. That's a really powerful book because it shows how. I'll just give you one small example from the book.
Yeah.
There was a case of malaria that was happening in Uganda, and the leaders tried all of these different techniques and nothing was happening. And the scientists realized, well, if we target the women who are treating the water in this particular community and have them have better water safety practices, maybe it was malaria or another disease, we're not sure, I forget, then maybe the cases will go down. And so they targeted that group and influenced them, and then they did the work to influence everybody else.
Mhm.
Right. And so like when you read that book and it gives examples from across the world, I think that can be powerful. Anything by Les Brown, I would definitely recommend because he's just powerful. Oh my gosh, I can't believe his name is escaping me. Come on, tell me the 10,000 hours. Oh my
Oh,
God.
Malcolm Gladwell.
Thank you, Malcolm Gladwell. I think his books are really powerful and transformational. Tim Ferriss has a lot of powerful stuff out there. The 4 Hour Work Week. There's a lot of power. So those are some of the people that come to mind when I think of people should be reading. But the main point is that you should be reading.
Mhm.
Another thing I learned from Les Brown is that the average American reads one book a year after they
Oof.
finish their academic studies. And leaders, you can't lead if you don't read. So
Right.
get out there and read that stuff.
A great point. My final question for you, Omékongo, actually surrounds some of the mindsets that we've been talking about. I think what we were referring to earlier was really ultimately that scarcity mindset versus that abundance mindset. As a leader, it takes a certain mindset to effectively lead a team. As a young leader, what kind of mindset work do we need to be doing before we actually take that first leadership position?
The first thing you have to do as a young person is you really have to educate yourself. You have to become as much of an expert on possible as possible on whatever it is that you're trying to lead, and anybody can do that, at any age. So if you know that in your community you got to reduce things like gun violence, well, what are the stats? Who are the leaders? Who are involved in that? If you know that you want to tackle homelessness, or in your school there's a political climate that's issue, there's a lot of racism or anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, whatever it is, what research are you doing to understand what it means? Because everybody can say, follow me, but where are you taking them? Because real recognizes real, and people can see really quickly if you're a false leader, if you're just there for the attention, for the social media clicks, the likes, and so on and so forth. And so that's the biggest thing that comes to my lead model. Just educate yourself on the issues, because people who want to be led, they are looking for expertise, and they don't want to follow somebody who's going to lead them down a pit. So that it just starts with education, but then it also starts with, it continues with compassion. You have to have compassion to want to see change, to want to see a difference in your community, because you just believe that everybody has the right to be able to live their best life.
Well said. Well, my final question, first of all, I want to thank you. You've been awesome. We really enjoyed you sharing some great insights with our audience today. But my last question, Omékongo, is this. You're a college professor.
Mhm.
What advice are you giving students as like career/life advice to get them off to a good start and hopefully get them to become a leader, because obviously leading yourselves, but leading and influence others in a positive way is, I think, what we ultimately like to see.
Well, one of the things that I'm doing is that every class they hear from the words of the great Zig Ziglar. And when I tell them that your career is what you're paid for, but your calling is what you're made for, I
Mm.
encourage them to stop. Don't waste this experience of college trying to find a career. Try to find a calling. And then I help them understand what a calling is and how they can use that in the work that they're doing. So don't just, I want to be valedictorian. I want to be this. You want to be an ambassador. You want to be a business leader. You want to be this. You want to be that. Whatever it is, focus on make your calling your career. Another thing that Ziegler said, your career is what you're paid for, but your calling is what you're made for, right? You have to really be mindful of that. You have to understand the difference between a calling versus a career. I don't know if I just um, said the same quotation twice. I don't know, but the idea is the same, right? So that's one thing I teach them, because it
Right.
was really impactful. I know what it was. I was going to attribute another quotation to him that wasn't his. That's why I ended up saying that again. There was another one where somebody said, I forget who it was. What would you do if you lived in a world where we didn't need money? You know,
Mm.
find that and make that your career. If we didn't need money, LeBron James would still be playing basketball. Taylor Swift would still be singing. Your favorite baseball player would still be swinging that baseball bat. Like, find that and then do it so well that people pay you for it. That's also a thing. And then also just, do your best to pay it forward. I remind them as that as well. I think is also really important.
Very
I kid Omekongo that the leader one aspect is the CRO, the chief reminding officer. So it's okay to repeat the quote. So,
I like that.
I'm curious in our final moments here if there's any way that we can get our hands or ears on any more of your poems or your music, because that was just phenomenal.
I appreciate that. Well, I encourage people to sign up and subscribe to youtube.com/Omekongo. I'm putting out content there regularly. Videos, official music videos are there as well. And of course, across all of the platforms, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your music, I have about 7 albums that are out there as well. You can get access to those. I have some free stuff on the Bandcamp website. You can also subscribe at liesaboutblackpeople.com and get those updates as well. So you can be the first to learn about all of the new information that's coming out. But yeah, I would love for people to support that. I would love to come out to people's schools and communities and do this work so we can continue to build these communities where everybody can be celebrated and not tolerated, which is also a phrase I learned from Les Brown.
Mhm. Dr. Omékongo Dibinga, wow. Thank you so much. And I'm just really blown away by all the great work that you're doing. And like I said, by your music, by your poetry, I can't wait to listen and dive into more. And then also those links that you just mentioned are down in the show notes. So go make sure you subscribe. Go make sure you check out some of the music. And of course, Lies About Black People book. Omékongo, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.